Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, the capital of northern BC, I say, in the northern BC, an amazing part of the province. And another thing that I should mention to our guests that are watching, it probably generates 80% of the GDP in the province of British Columbia. So I tell my friends down south, hey, don't forget about where the money comes from. I have an amazing guest as well today. His name is Mike Bernier. He is a politician in a way, but a fellow that comes from northern BC, has that kind of a background. He's right now, or just was became the, as they call the opposition, the BC Liberals, and became the shadow minister of forest critic. And Mike, welcome to the show.
It's a real pleasure. I'm really excited to be here. And as you mentioned, we're center of the province, but we've been telling everybody while we're up here in Prince George, I'm here for a resource forum right now. And it's a great opportunity to remind everybody, the breadbasket, that the resources really are in the rural parts of BC and how we help fund a lot that goes on in the province. In
this amazing province, really, with all the resources that we have, the location that we have vis-a-vis markets, Asia on the one side, the United States on the south of us, and then Europe and the rest of Canada to our east. And then it's such an amazing province, and as we fly over it, it's so large and so huge. And here in Prince George, although the mayor of Vanderhoof would disagree with me, I say this is he's actually right. This part is the center, the exact center of the province of British Columbia.
We forget how large British Columbia is, and we're always trying to remind people when we're down in Victoria that they're only seeing a small part of what's going on in the world, and that we need to remember that British Columbia is, from a governing standpoint, we have to govern for the entire province.
Exactly.
So large, so diverse, but you're right, when you talk about how lucky we are, whether it's forestry, mining, oil and gas, tourism, agriculture, I mean, you go on, we have it all here. We're very blessed.
And Mike, the best is yet to come.
That's the hope.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more. We have challenges with the forest industry, no question about it. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But in regards all of that, if you fly over the province, and I know a lot of people would like you to say that, they look outside, as I always do, outside of the window, and all they see around them is forest. And they would say, why? Well, because we have what we call a sustainable yield, and that allows us to harvest on a very direct way and doing an analysis of how much can we harvest and on an annual basis to maintain that steady growth. And that's why we have so much forest, that is there. It's all part of the annual albacore.
Yeah.
That being talked about, is I want to talk a little bit more about your background, because you are, I say that respectfully, and not what people would conceive to be a natural politician that is slick, and I say that respectfully, and smooth, but you look like all of us of northern people from the north.
No, thanks. For me, it's I don't want to say it's my shtick, because I try to be who I am. And as you say, like for those of us in rural British Columbia, I think that's the big part of who we are. We can get along with people. We understand our communities. For myself, I never planned on getting into politics. That was definitely not something that was on a bucket list or a dream of mine.
No.
But I have 5 kids. And so being like a lot of people, when you have your kids, you get involved in your community. You get involved with the sports, you get involved in the Rotary clubs, in the Legion, the different opportunities there. And one thing led to another, because as you get involved, you start seeing where there's opportunity to help more people, and sometimes maybe where the frustration is, where you think you can help your community move along in a direction. So
let's talk about your family a little bit. Tell me a little bit about them. The 5 kids, the names, and your wife, or
5 kids. So I've been married now. I better not get it wrong, but it's just over 30 years. I got married in 1991. And I got married in Terrace, British Columbia, actually. In the north here as well. And we have our 5 children. My oldest would be mid-30s, and my youngest is 20, and I've got 4 grandkids now too.
So amazing.
The hair is falling out faster than it can turn gray. But I'm just loving the place that I'm at right now with my family, spending the time when I'm home with the grandkids is amazing.
So, were you born in that region, or how did you? How does Dawson Creek come into the picture?
You know, it's an interesting way how things worked out. I was actually born in North Vancouver.
Okay.
I'm a fourth generation from North Van. My family's been there since the late 1800s.
Okay.
And when I was around 19, 20 years old in that area, I met my wife, the woman I was to marry. We moved up to Terrace, where her family was, just to try to help out because there was some family struggles and we needed to be there to help. And while I was there, I just fell in love with the North.
Yeah.
And I got offered an opportunity to work with a natural gas company up in Dawson Creek.
Okay.
And so I was only in my 21, 22 years old.
Right.
Moved to Dawson Creek. And you know, I think I'm going to be like a lot of people up north that came from the larger city is I'll go for 2 years. I'll go for maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. I'll work in the sector and move back down south. Never left.
No.
The life up here is amazing. The people are amazing. The generosity that you just have with people on the streets and communities is just second to none. So, and what better place to raise a family than in the rural parts of British Columbia where there's
Give me the names of your kids.
I've got...
Who is 30?
I've got Neil is a little older. Neil's the oldest, then Devlin, and then I've got son Reese, and then daughter Michaela, and then a son Trevor.
Yeah. So, four boys, one girl?
No, so three boys, 2 girls.
Yeah, three boys, 2 girls. And then, you know, so my wife actually, you know, she was born in Nanaimo, but was not there for very long. Her dad was with the civilian part of the Air Force, Canadian Air Force. So they went all over the place, to Europe even. And then they went back to Edmonton. And then when she was a teenager and about 16 years old or so, 15, 16, ended up in Bonanza.
Oh, wow.
You know Bonanza.
I know Bonanza quite well, yeah.
You know, Bonanza, for those guests that are saying, where is Dawson Creek from here again? Because we have a lot of people watching internationally. What would you say by road? How long does it take you? 6, 7, 8 hours?
No, it's actually not that far, actually. It's only about 400 kilometers.
Okay.
So in the summertime when the roads are good, you can do it in the 4 hours. But, but geographically, it'd be right behind me, 400 kilometers straight to the north,
Straight to the north.
Northeast,
Yeah, northeast. And then, so that's where she went, and she went to school then, and lived in Dawson City, Dawson Creek for a period of time, and, so...
and it's such a small world, and even though we talked originally about how large British Columbia is, it doesn't matter where I go in the province. I talk to people that say, oh, my sister used to work there, or my friend is from there. Like, everybody seems to know somebody from that part of the province. It actually is quite astonishing how that works out.
Now, the interesting part also was that for myself, I was born in Holland, and I came here when I was 24, and I was born in 1940, so I'm 82. And, and then we were liberated by the Canadians April the 12th, 1945. I remember it well, even as 5. And I always had a dream. I wanted to go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I always knew that I would at some point. It was not if, but when. And, and then the other dream that I had is wanted to build my own lumber mill. And so when I came here in 1965, the reason that I came here is because the immigration department in Vancouver could speak the language. You know, I happened to run into a fellow that spoke German. I could speak some German, so I told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, go to Prince George. So that's what I did. Came here to Prince George, about 2 blocks from here, on on a Greyhound bus. Yep. And when I came off the bus, I had a suitcase, 2 sets of clothes, 3 books, and I had $25.47.
I was going to ask what that was.
I knew you were going to ask. So that's what I had in my pocket. But I was going to build a lumber mill, and then the other thing that I did is so I started as a cleanup man, the lumber pilot, and all that other kind of stuff, and that didn't go fast enough for me. So I had an opportunity to manage a sawmill and I would get 1/3 of the ownership, and of all places, Watson Lake, Yukon.
Oh, wow. A little further north than here.
And then kind of remembering back, and this may be interesting for the people that are watching us. So Watson Lake, Yukon, okay, that is on what we call the Alaska Highway. And mile 0 for the Alaska Highway, Dawson Creek.
Dawson Creek, yeah.
And then now go back to 67. There was no paving on the Alaska Highway.
Nope.
Mile 613, 613 miles further north was the road, the Alaska Highway, and it was built like this, all corners, and people say, why? Because it was built by the Americans as a defense road, so that if they got attacked, that planes could not shoot down all the things.
Yeah, well, you explained it perfectly, and it's one of the opportunities that we have in our region is around tourism, because of how the highway was built. Of course, it's paved now. It's straightened out in a few places. Still a couple of funny curves in it, but from a tourism standpoint, the amount of Americans that come up through Prince George off to Dawson Creek because they want to do the Alaska Highway.
They must do it.
Exactly.
That is the one province state that we have not been, and we have to do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's we try to capitalize on that as best we can. The last couple of years, it's been obviously a lot different when it comes to people traveling, but it's great to see people out and about. We were talking about even the conference here today that I'm attending is over 1,000 people. We're finally face to face again. It's giving the resource sector an opportunity.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing turnout, right?
Oh, yes.
A little bit more about Dawson Creek and Northern British Columbia, because that's so important about it. So anyway, I was in Watson Lake for 5 years, and then was the general manager of Watson Lake Lumber, small operation. All the employees were First Nations. I had my Sawyer. He was a fellow from here, was experienced, and then I stayed in a motel. I bought a motel, and I was only 26, 27, starting with that, and and then after 5 years, I gave it all away for $1. It's all. I'm gonna, before you go, I'm gonna give you a book that I wrote against all odds, and I'll sign it for you, and I'll give it to you.
I appreciate that.
But it kind of tells the story, and but the amazing thing that I always found, that how huge this province is, and how the opportunities are there, and there have been some that were not quite as successful and are not anymore. Others have, and there is still so much more to come, because there are so many resources here, so many things. What I'm referring to in particular, then when we had, when I was managing Watson Lake Lumber, we would sell lumber to Cassiar.
Oh, wow.
And Cassiar, that was still the asbestos mine was there, and obviously is gone now. The mountain, it was the top off of it, is still there, but that kind of became a problem area. But otherwise, then that it's amazing. So now, when you came to Dawson Creek, and then you were there for a long time, and then you were looking at your kids and thinking about your kids, and got more involved in the community, and then felt that you had to kind of walk the talk and see if you could be part of this.
Yeah, it happened by circumstance in a way.
Yeah.
Soccer is one of my passion sports, and so there wasn't really an organized soccer league up in Dawson Creek.
Right.
100 kids playing on fields here and there. And so I thought, I'm going to try to build this program up. So I went out and I raised a bunch of money, worked with a few other people. We built a big soccer park in Dawson Creek. Yeah. And we went from 100 kids to about 1,400 kids playing soccer in our small community. It became the sport of choice for the summer months. And but anyway, through that time, when I was going through all the land acquisition and trying to look at the tax implications, parks issues with the city, I became friends with the mayors and council at the time. And anyway, one of my friends that ended up being a city councillor, who was also helped me out soccer coaching, just came to me and said, "Hey, I'm running for mayor. You should run for council. There'll be at least one change because I won't be there." A young gentleman by the name of Calvin Crook. And he ended up winning and becoming mayor, and I ended up saying, "Okay, I'll run and I'll become a councillor." And I was the only non-incumbent to win that election. And take it forward about 3 years. Unfortunately, he, at a very young age, was diagnosed with lung cancer. He was in his early 40s. And he came to me and said, "Mike," he goes, "I want to run one more term for council or for mayor, but I have to start going through chemo and radiation." He goes, "So can we work out a deal?" Because he knew that I was working and I had my family, and council I was enjoying, but it wasn't my life, my passion, my dream at the time. He said, "Can you put your name forward for mayor? I'll put my name forward for council, and we'll switch." Because he could afford a bit more time as a councillor to go through chemo and radiation. And the handshake deal that him and I had was that as soon as he was feeling better and stronger, that I would step back and force a by-election so he could run to be mayor again. And just the way things worked out, he lived only about 5 more weeks and then passed. It went that fast. Very aggressive.
And hence you were mayor.
And I had already put my name forward for mayor. I ran, I won. And then I did a couple more terms. I got in by acclamation. It was, it's one of those ones that you always hope people put their name forward for democracy, but when they don't and you win by acclamation, I'm okay with that too.
Well, obviously it was the choice of the public that did that, right? So
and once I was had both my feet in the sandbox, so to speak, I really enjoyed it, and I went all out. I started engaging with the provincial government. I became friends with the premier and a lot of the different ministers at the time. And
who was the
Gordon Campbell was the premier at first. I worked. So he was a great individual, very passionate, and understood rural British Columbia. And during the relationship him and I had, he helped get me onto a couple of provincial boards. Which helped me really understand the province better and gave me a different insight into provincial politics.
Exactly.
So when the MLA in my region, his name was Blair Lekstrom, when he decided he wasn't going to run again, I got the phone call in the afternoon basically saying, "I'm not running in the next election. I'm announcing it this afternoon. If you want to get into provincial politics, here's your chance." Again, it was one of those.
It was about 2 terms ago, right? How long ago?
So I'm actually in my 3rd term now.
3rd term,
So 2013 is when I was elected there in the province. But anyway, it was just one of those situations.
So was it a competitive race between you and others?
Well, it was another interesting thing. Usually in our area, the fight is who's going to be the member that's for the BC Liberal Party at the time, right? So it's who's going to be the candidate. That's usually the fight, because I live in a part of the province that historically has never voted for a left party, NDP or anything. It was Reform for a while. It was SOCRED and BC Liberal. So the fight is always do that. And interestingly,
for the nomination,
exactly. So and interestingly. I would say my team around me said, "Get out and announce right away."
The sooner you get out, the better.
Scare off some tire kickers, maybe. And so it was basically the same as the municipal election. I announced, I gave a couple of days for Blair to have the limelight, and then I announced that I was going to run, and nobody contested it. Nobody ran against me. So,
Well, it would be a very difficult one because you were popular already, skilled and knowledgeable, and. So that was a whole different feeling, because now all of a sudden, now what is going to happen? Now you're no longer home all the time.
That is a challenge.
Now you have to, and with all due respect, Dawson Creek is not the easiest place to get to Victoria.
No, it's actually one of the things that in Victoria that we talk about is the respect and understanding of how large the province is and the challenges for our rural MLAs.
Yeah.
When you look at most of the government MLAs right now that are in Victoria, they can be home in 15 minutes after work.
Yeah.
It's no different than,
just
going across the street, so to speak, right? No different than any other job. Whereas for us, especially with the flight challenges, we're in Victoria from Sunday night is when we have to be there, and we can leave Thursday night.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because of travel and flights, I don't get home until dinner time on Fridays.
Yeah.
And I have to leave Sunday mornings to get down there.
That makes it tough, right?
It is hard on the family. I was fortunate that my kids were a little older, so if they were younger, it would have been tough.
You need, but probably would have happened to you when that opportunity presented itself. You had to have a good talk to the family and saying, are we prepared to do this?
For a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
Once you're in the fishbowl a little differently, you definitely want to make sure your family, you can't do it if they don't support you. It's impossible. It's not fair. But you also have to make them realize that you're in the public eye differently. This isn't just in a small community where everybody knows you at the restaurant and grocery store.
No.
This is now a situation where people don't know you but have an opinion. And that is what my family, I have to say, it was the hardest thing. It's not just me. I would say it's almost every politician is when, well, here's the thing. My wife's favorite expression for me is, once they know you, they will like you, and win them over one at a time. Yeah. Because
that's the right attitude. Right?
It's tough when you look at people, especially with social media.
Yeah. And
they have an opinion of who they think you are, even though they've never met you.
Yeah. And then the other part about that, Mike, is, in my opinion, is that's what I always say. Credibility is indefensible because your friends will know, and your adversaries, no matter what you say, you can't convince them. And so the approach your wife said is win them over one at a time is the right way to go. And saying that, okay, you sort it out, and then my deeds will show you who I am in due course, so hopefully.
Yeah, and it was a real eye-opener for myself when I first got into provincial politics now, so in 2013 area, and shortly after that I was fortunate, that was when Christy Clark was Premier, and I was put in
2011?
Yeah, she came in around 2011, exactly. And in 2000, I think it was end of 14 or in 15, I became the Minister of Education for the province under that government. Under Christy. Under Christy. Yeah. And that was...
What an experience, eh?
It was an amazing honor, but it's also, again, it was a perfect experience to realize, again, how large the province is and how different the issues are. I would think that educating our kids should be the same in downtown Vancouver as it is in Prince George, as it is in Watson Lake if we went up there. And you're right, it's not. And we have to be flexible and understand what the opportunities are and how we take advantage of those in our different regions. Yeah,
yeah. But what an experience for you. And then from there on in, for a while we had a change in government. And, and then in the same time, you were still the MLA. And then obviously now we are, again, still in the NDP as government. And then you more or less have a position of being what I call the critic, or at least, that is the natural role of the opposition. But not to the extent that there may be a lot of things that are in common, hopefully. But
I was very blessed to be on the government side.
Yeah.
And you're in the decision-making role, but I am also not only just honored to stay as the MLA, but I think going into opposition, it was humbling. Yeah. And it really gave me a different understanding, because you hate to say you take things for granted. But sometimes you have to step back and look, even as a party. I'll never say we did everything right either. No. No party does. But it wasn't until 2016-17 when we left government, when the NDP formed, that we looked back and started realizing, maybe we weren't doing things right. Maybe some of these critics were correct, that we should have been looking at things a little differently. So it's been a good soul-searching time. Yeah. But now being the critic, it also, my wife, again, teases me a little bit, because by nature I was always quite outgoing and quite positive. And now she says, geez, you're so cranky sometimes now because your job is to, as a critic, is to basically criticize. My job is not to look now as the forestry critic, but it's not to look at what government's doing and pat them on the back. It's to try to find where they're not meeting the mark.
Yeah.
And,
what else could they do, that follows your particular political...
Yeah, or if they make a promise that they're going to do something, they don't deliver. Now it's my job to remind everybody. They promised this, it hasn't happened, and push government to go through with their promises. So
now, do you have a place in Victoria that you stay out? How do you do that?
Yeah, I do. When I first got elected, I stayed in the hotel next to the Parliament building. And realized very quickly, because of the amount of traveling I had to do and the amount of time I had to spend in Victoria, it was not something I could see doing for a long time.
No.
So I rent a little apartment down there now, so at least I can leave my clothes. I can leave my computer.
Have a place to hang up your clothes.
That's right, and it's a place
to feel home to a certain extent. Right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I can throw on my housecoat and slippers, and it feels like I'm at home.
Yeah, and that's important. Yeah, we are lucky enough to have a place in North Saanich.
Beautiful place.
I bought a lot there in 1996, and then in 2001 built a house there right at the very end of North Saanich, at the highest point actually. 5-6 minutes away from the ferry, 6-7 minutes away from the airport.
Oh, so quite close to Sydney then in that area.
Yeah, within 6-7 minutes from Sydney. And then we have a 50-acre farm there because both my wife and myself, we ride horses, and we have about 6, 7, 8 horses as well, ride English dressage.
So you've come a little ways from your $25.47.
I did.
Yeah.
And well, I just love Canada. I love BC, and I love what I do.
I think it's important when we talk about that too. Is we take things for granted so much. That we forget how big the world is and some of the struggles in other countries, and how blessed and lucky we are here in British Columbia, which I would argue is the best province in Canada.
I say that over and over and over again, saying that I fly a lot as you do, and I always sit by the windows, and I make it a case, I want to be sitting there, and I look out the window, I said, paradise. I said it over and over and over again. It simply does not get any better.
Yeah, and we forget how spread out we are too. Like, even though our population base is majority of it around the Lower Mainland, but it is it's one of those things, as you say, when you're flying over. I always like to sit by the window too. And I look out, and sometimes it's really hard to figure out where you are, because it's hard to get a point to fixate on, to say, oh, there's that city or there's that city, because it's just land, it's mountains, it's trees. On every side of the window you look out of. We're pretty lucky.
Now, that being said, and I'm going to give you a copy of this, and I'd write this moment, but I'm going to show it to you and our guest, is that, things were not always easy, as they are not for a lot of people. And, when I was in school in Holland, I didn't do so well. I failed grade 3 once, and nobody fails grade 3. Although I had some guests who say, yeah, I failed grade 2, actually, so, oh, good. And then I failed grade 7 3 times. And it took me till I was 57 that I walked into a store here, and I somehow picked up a book, and the title of the book was Driven by Distractions. And I don't still know today even as to why I started looking at it. And it was talking about ADHD.
Oh, okay.
Up to that point, I had no idea. And as I started reading it, I said to myself, oh my God, that is me. And I must have been there for 15 minutes or so, because the store owner came saying, well...
Are you going to buy that?
Are we going to buy it or what? He was just joking. But I did buy it, and I wrote inside it in Dutch, now I finally know who I am. Because this was when I was 57, and I'm 82 now, so that was about 15, 16 years ago. And, and then... it took me another 5 years before I went to my home doctor, which was my friend, because I had shamed around it, and that I said, I came into his office, and he said to me, why are you here, John? I said, you know something? I think I got ADHD. And so we talked about it, and I do, you know. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the other part that I felt is that, again, talking about the challenges, you know, that, you know, you must have dream and ambitions, and then, and even if things are challenging, like I probably affected by PTSD because of the trauma that we went through doing things were not easy in the area that we lived. My dad left before I was born physically, was drafted into the Dutch army, and they didn't know for 5 years if he was dead or alive. And my mother had 3 kids, and I was the youngest, and then a brother and a sister, and things were not easy.
No.
And you know, and some of the other things, and I felt I had to talk about those things, and then the struggles that go along with it. And so I wrote this book, and Against All Odds, and you know, so and it's not about hurrah, hurrah, John, how successful he is and all. No, it's not about that. It's about, in spite of all the challenges, is staying the course and believing that you can do, how important that is.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote it. I will sign it for you before you go.
Appreciate
that was the
that.
one. And then I wrote another one, you know, because I started to talk about more about ADHD, and more and more people. I always believe that the frequency of occurrence is much higher than most people believed it was. In addition to that, slow learners, and you know it from the time that you were Minister of Education, is that education is very, very structured, where for people that are affected by ADHD, but also by trauma, and are natural slow learners or something else, are just not meant to sit in classrooms for 4 years, and they're not very good at that.
That's right.
At all. And I felt I had to write about ADHD, and I did. You know, so, you know, this one took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. So, but then after that, I thought I'm going to write this about, become very, very popular, actually. And it talks about, you know, the different things about ADHD and all the other things that are related to that. Yeah. Become very, very popular. I will get you a copy of this as well.
Appreciate that. And you know, it's really important. It's a great message and good for you. Congratulations. But the message also is, you know, we have the opportunities and how amazing the province is, as we said, but not everybody's fortunate enough to maybe live the life that you or I and others have had, because there are people, as great as it is here, that do struggle with different mental health issues that are undiagnosed. I saw that, as you said, in the school system, that so many children, that we needed to adapt our system rather than trying to expect the children to adapt to the system.
Correct.
Right? Because it wasn't working. And yes, for generations, that was the structure. You walk in, you don't talk, you listen, you do your reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's society's changed, and that's one of the things, I think, from a government standpoint, that we have to remember. Society changes, people change, we have to change.
Exactly. Yeah, very much so. And so to me that has been important. There's another book coming out that I'm doing right now. I want to write one book a year, and the one that I'm doing right now is coming out in July, is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. Saying how important it is that, you know, I know so many people, they have a job and say, I hate my job. Well, if you hate your job, then likely that affects everything that you do around you.
It can.
It affects your family, it affects the people that are around you. Stop doing that, find something that you like.
Yeah, a lot of people get into, maybe not a rut, but out of need, maybe aren't willing to take that risk all the time.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I say that to my kids as well. You know, I got into the oil and gas industry by circumstance.
Yeah.
You know, I was lucky I had a great company. It wasn't my passion. It wasn't my dream.
No.
My dream actually was music. I love music.
Amazing.
And I love singing, and I love entertaining.
Amazing.
And that's what I always did when I was younger. Never got to do a lot of it. I still do it now a little bit for fun. But I remind my kids that, you know, once you get married, you have your own kids, you start having a mortgage, you start having bills, you can get yourself into a rut where, and as you say, you might not be living your best life. You might not be living your dream, and that can put strain on you, which can put strain on your marriage and strain on your life. And so you have to find that balance as well.
And even then you can still find a balance, right? Saying that, okay, I can do part of the music, or I can adapt myself to say, yeah, I accept that, that's good. And basically the purpose of the book is saying, we show you some examples of where people made choices, what they did, and that hopefully will help them. That's why I did it.
Excellent.
That to me is important. And then, the other thing, now we have to talk about the forest industry.
Oh.
And I understand you're just a month in the file right now, but you're familiar with the industry already, because you've been exposed to it indirectly. Obviously, one of the reasons that we are here today as well is that the Natural Resource Conference is on. Amazing turnout, actually, more than 1,000 people, because we haven't done this in about 3 years or something like that.
Yeah, they were doing it virtually, but it's just not the same.
No, it's not the same. But then, now what is happening is, most currently it's in the news very much so, 300 people being laid off by Canfor Pulp, Prince George Pulp and Paper, and it's one of their pulp lines in particular. They have, a number of pulp mills here in the region, and in Prince George 3 or 3.5. The one is about double the size, and so they, and that's a shock to the community. 300 people laid off, and then more indirectly.
That's right.
Now, part of it, in all fairness, we already knew in 2000 that what would happen is with the pine beetle pandemic, that would virtually destroy 70%, I would say, of the lodgepole pine, in timber in the interior of the province. And then add to that the fires that happened, add to that the deferrals that were put into place. What has happened now to the annual allowable cut being at around 60 million cubic meters in the province on average in that area, reduced down to about 40-ish. And as a result of that, at least, and maybe a few more to come, but 35 sawmills were shut down. But I always say is that about 4 sawmills, 4.5, maybe 5 at the maximum, feed 1 pulp mill.
That's right.
So what would follow is that there is simply and not simply, I'm not being disregarding, I think it's horrible that people lose their jobs and their careers, but if you have to look at the other part too, and saying this was not if, but when was more the question. And throughout the province, I was just going to make the one more comment. We probably have seen 7 or 8 different pulp mills have closed down already throughout the province.
Yeah, so forestry, especially being here in Prince George, I mean, Prince George is really founded around the forestry sector.
Yeah.
When you look at the history of the community and the smaller communities around here as well.
Yeah.
When you get to Houston, Fort St. James,
Yeah.
Mackenzie.
Yeah.
A lot of that we're forest
Fort St.
dependent.
John.
Fort St. John as well, and even up in Taylor in my area and
Yeah.
Chetwynd, forest dependent communities.
Yes.
And so I think it's really important that, and I've been talking about this already, is signaling that forestry is not gone, but it might have to change.
Yeah.
And we have to look at that. As you and I were saying, when we fly around the province, there's lots of fiber out there.
Yeah.
But is it easily and economically accessible?
Yeah.
That is the challenge that a lot of these companies are faced with now. And it's an interesting thing that I was hearing today with some people. When you look at how British Columbia was founded, before all the technology, we had small mills all over the place because they had to build the mill by the fiber.
Yeah.
Because of transportation challenges, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago.
600 sawmills around Prince George.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so you started seeing all of the consolidation and the closing of those little ones and getting these larger corporation-run mills rather than really family-run mills, which is what we had. But one of the interesting dialogues that I heard even today was that the timber's there, the demand's there. Are we going to see ourselves starting to move back into smaller mills that can be moved easier, closer to the resource? How's this going to look, right? Like this is the talk that people are having now.
Yeah.
We don't want to say it's the end of the industry by any means, because it's not. But it is going to look different. We know that.
You see, what I believe is that, what will happen is that, not unsimilar to what happened in Sweden. And I did a podcast, as I said earlier, with Jan Hedberg. If you have an opportunity, look at it about 3-4 days ago. It's a virtual that we did, actually. But I've known him for a long time. I worked in Sweden, or was a number of times in Sweden, worked with their forest, because that's what we imported in Holland. And their fiber, not unsimilar to ours, for one. And they went through a period similar to ours, where they had too much capacity, not enough timber, and they started an incentive managing of their forest. Now, the forest ownership is much more public there than it is here. 96% of our forest is owned by you and me, the people. They're there probably 50, 60 years, and the communities own more, and about 10 to 12% is owned by the government. The rest is all, but still the issues are the same. And then the other part that they did is they started doing more value-added manufacturing, extracting more value from the fiber. And they did that very successfully. And then after they did that for a period of time, they got to the point where now, and I believe and project that I believe that will happen in British Columbia if we follow the right policy. More intensive forestry on the land base. There is no reason that we cannot grow more fiber per hectare if we manage the land base well. Are we managing it well now? Amazingly, yes, we are doing that. Since the mid-'80s, when government said that rather than government trying to do the replanting, which was not happening very well, now it's done by industry as a mandate. That worked well. We're now planting 3 to 4 trees for everyone that we harvest. The other part that we can do more in terms of managing that process even better. But by and large, we're doing it well. The likelihood is that in the midterm, and a lot of people say, well, what's the midterm? Well, that's, the delicate part. It's probably 40, 50 years. That's not a long time.
Not in the scheme of things.
Because I was involved, and we had a little mill set up in the Bowrun when they had the spruce beetle killed there. If I go back now, and that was in the early 80s, 83. If you go back now, you wouldn't recognize it. And I know you know that from your own experiences already. So what I'm saying, that's not really a long time. And it then happens gradually because the Ministry of Forest steadily is evaluating areas in terms of adjustments to the annual allowable cut, upward or downward or whatever, but in most cases upward. And so gradually we will grow more. And I believe, as most experts do, I believe that are knowledgeable, that if we do it well, then we can get back to from where we are now at 40 million cubic meters per annual. And there are some other adjustments that we can make, I believe now, to bring that up higher. But gradually we will bring it up to back to the 60, and we can, if we do it well, bring it up to 90, because there is no area in the world other than probably Sweden that can grow so well fiber of the kind that we have here. And amazingly, and as you watch my program with Sweden, they took some of the species that we have here, transplanted them there. They have similar spruce, similar pine, but some of the ones that are doing even better than that really came from British Columbia.
Yeah, and we have to look at that.
So they are doing much better. So what I'm saying, then, there's no magic here. That I believe that another area where I would think that government can do better is that the deferrals of the old growth, I believe may have gone too far.
Yeah.
And where we started, and again, at the risk of being critical of anybody in particular, but saying that at the time that they did the selection of all of that, there was maybe too much influence of environmental groups that don't like to have any logging if possible. And I say that again respectfully. I don't have particular names that, but if I now look at it and look at in the province of British Columbia, we have about 11 million hectares of old growth forest. 75% of that already is protected.
Yes, that's right.
Where we have the problem is that there is no one that I know from, doesn't matter what political persuasion they have, that thinks that we should knock down the big giant trees. I can see no particular purpose for that unless it is because they become dangerous for some reason or another. Yeah. I think we should preserve those. But what is happening now, that because the one is the physical size of the timber, the other one is the age. And I think down the coast it's about 250 years in older, considered to be old growth, and then in the interior it can be 150 years old in this size.
Exactly.
I think that has gone too far. And that must be readjusted, because now it's becoming a question of, is there old growth here? What does it look like? And it does not make sense, and that can be corrected.
Yeah, no, you're right. In policy creation, sometimes we go too far. And I looked at some of the old growth maps, and I even around this region and up towards mine, where they say, oh, this is now considered old growth. And I go out and I look at these trees, and you're right, they're maybe a foot across, if that.
If that, yeah.
And they're saying, this is old growth? Well, we're really going to struggle to have a sustainable forest industry if we start have things go too far. But, your point about the midterm, we've talked about this, and this is one of the challenges with that, is you're right, in the sense that, in the midterm, there's going to have to be changes, and it could take the 40, 50 years. I just can't talk about that on too much, because the families that just lost their jobs they don't want to wait 40, 50 years.
No.
What's next? And so that's one of the challenges, I would say, in government, is how do you find the dynamics?
What I say, Mike, is this, that we already have known for a long time, and I've been in the industry for 60 years. Mm-hmm. And then had my own company for 50 years. We are a secondary manufacturer. Normally we employ close to 400 people. We don't cut one single tree. Nor have we ever had a handout from government of any sort. So I believe in further manufacturing, that we should have more value-added manufacturing. Some of my friends in the larger companies don't like it all that much. But I believe that the other challenge I believe that we have, and a lot of people in the public asking questions about that, too much of the annual allowable cut is controlled by too few companies. Where 5 companies control 75% of the annual allowable cut, and most of them have most of their operations elsewhere.
Somewhere else, yeah.
That's a challenge, and I think that what we should do is attract more value-added manufacturers, like companies like us. There used to be in northern British Columbia alone more than 50 companies in value-added manufacturing. Right now, at best, it is 3 or 4. And I believe in another year or 2 from now, there'll be less than 2. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Well, there's a number of reasons for it. That I believe the future of the industry is where once primary manufacturers feel confident again and will invest in the mills will become smaller. They will be more focused on certain profiles of timber they're going to use. They will use more technology and robotics and all of those things. And they will, and this is the operative, employ less people, even than they do now. However, I was one of the ones that was supporting the intentions paper, and somebody from First Nations spoke to it, somebody from Labour spoke to it, somebody from industry. For some reason, they asked me, and I said sure, and I thought that some primaries would, but they didn't. Oh. But I did. Yeah. I said the future of the industry is where we have innovative primary in combination with intensive secondary. And I believe that 50% of the lumber manufactured by the primary sector, 25% of the lower grades, 25% of the higher grades will go up the value chain. That's what I believe. Yeah. And once they do, it will double the employment that we see in the forest industry. Even now, that's already possible to do that. All we have to do is accept the fact that if we want to attract investment in value-added manufacturing, the investor has to have reasonable expectation of access to fiber.
That's the kicker.
And if they don't, no one is going to invest a nickel. No. And there are some things happening right now, believe it or not, because of government policies that that are stimulating investment in China at the time in the early 2000 was something everybody's excited about. That's where we have to send export wood to, and we spend a lot of money, government money, to create the markets. The problem is they're not building houses like we are.
No.
They don't need dimension lumber. They needed low grades. All the low grades manufactured here now in the province of British Columbia that used to be further manufactured by secondary manufacturers is going to China.
Yeah, and what you've highlighted though is that business as usual isn't going to work.
No.
We know that, and so
that's the point.
Yeah, and we need to, I think as government, as policy makers, we need to be on the ground more, listening to people who have an understanding and knowledge of what will or will not work.
Yeah.
Because sitting in Victoria making a proclamation or a decision that's not going to work doesn't help anybody.
Does not.
We're already one of the highest cost jurisdictions.
And we can't
have to deal with that.
Yeah. Right. We have to be, and then the other part that I was going to say, I believe our stumpage system that we have now is broken. It doesn't mean that the primary should get it for free, but it's not responsive to markets. And obviously right now what we have is we have a combination of things. Lumber prices from last year when the prices dropped 70%.
That's right.
That's creating problems. Then obviously the other thing is that the effect of beetles and fires and deferrals to a certain extent has reduced the annual allowable cut substantially. Then the main primary sector is concerned about losing control over what they believe is their wood, which it obviously isn't. Are concerned about losing control over some of that, and obviously part up to about 20% of the annual allowable cut will go to First Nations because by law, and we have accepted that will happen, and I think that's a good thing, and they will share in the revenue. But the other thing that has to happen is that what I've been advocating is that in the early 90s already. I was quite involved in the BC Council value-added wood processes, and 20% of the annual allowable cut was dedicated to value-added manufacturing. And there were flaws in the program, but I still believe that that's the way we have to go, is set aside timber because at the end of the day, that's the currency that in order to interact with incredible relationships with primaries, you have to have something to offer, because I go through this all the time. Sit down with primaries looking for access to fiber. In our case, right now, although we want to do more other stuff, how do we get access to fiber? And they say, well, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
If you don't have nothing to offer, then you say, well, have a nice day.
Well, and one of the biggest challenges, I think, in this specific sector, and I would even say when it comes to oil and gas, mining, a lot of the other resource-based industries, we're in a position right now, and you mentioned like the environmental movement, that there's a lot of people seem to be afraid of their shadow to make decisions right now.
Yeah.
And that's creating a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so when you have people sitting around a board table saying, are we going to invest $100 million to modernize a plant? Well, they have to look at, okay, well, we don't know what our annual allowable cut will be. We don't know what the protests are going to be. We don't know where government's direction is going. And right now there's just so much uncertainty. And that's what I'm hearing. And people are in the larger companies and the smaller companies. We want to be in the sandbox playing. Just tell us what the rules are.
And whatever they are, Mike, that's what I'm saying. Whatever they are, they will accept. You know, as long as it's clear, as long as it's fair. At the same time, we have to all be sensitive that you know, we cannot have a viable secondary sector unless we have a healthy primary sector. We want to make sure that we collectively are working together as an industry and that we are globally competitive with others, because and that's why I'm saying I've always been an advocate of that. The other part, in terms of our stumpage system, is broken. It's not responsive to reality. The other part, and because we brought it up earlier, which I believe is important, that government is a party to industry, secondary, primary, and all the other ones. They have to become more of a part to it, in saying that we have to recognize that timber in the northern part of the province, because of the distance from operation, has to be treated differently than other timber that's in the areas. And if that means that we have to have a discussion about how do we do that, it is likely one where we have to start talking about the railroads that are going there that are not being utilized, in my opinion, that we can use that you know, by industry as a way of bringing timber closer to the marketplace. And those are some of the areas, in my opinion.
Well, and I'm smirking as you're saying that, because it's reminding me that the bad habits that sometimes governments have is they make a policy decision for the province, and back to how we started talking today about how large the province is, how diverse it is. And when you make a rule, the cookie cutter approach, as they say, a rule in Victoria that's supposed to work everywhere, and it doesn't. And so we have to figure out, if we want to have our resource sector sustainable, if we want to be progressive in any way, we need to adapt as well with our policies and understand the differences as society is changing, but as the access to the resources changing, our policies have to follow with that to be a bit more flexible.
And if you really look at the reality, major adjustments have been made to the TSAs and the different regions south of Prince George, including the Prince George region, but not so much so in the Mackenzie region or from there on further north.
That's right.
So that, you know, and coming to what you were saying, is that what I always say is, you know, sometimes government is no different. We can become very efficient on being ineffective. And ineffective means logic, to me, dictates what is the problem with the beautiful timber that we have in those areas. Why is it not feasible to bring that into the marketplace? If they are a party to the industry being successful, then they would have to recognize that. And rather than sitting there and saying, well, no, we're not going to do anything, well, look at other ways. How do we bring that wood? If we are a party to making us collectively be more compatible in the marketplace globally, then we have to recognize that. And what do we do about it? It's nothing to do with subsidizing industry. It's simply saying we are government, a stakeholder, and making sure we can bring it to market. First, we have to bring it to the marketplace in some form, that it does not make those that are buying it, you know, you can't operate because it's too expensive.
And you know, you mentioned like subsidies and stuff too, and as we're talking about this, with a lot of these companies, large and small, they're not looking for subsidy. They're looking for just access and certainty. And government's job is to set policy on behalf of the people of British Columbia. But we also have to remember, we're not the experts.
No.
And we need to let the experts do and let the experts advise. So we can make the best decisions that'll help them. And I think as things are changing in the different sectors, we also have to remember that some of the most innovative people and tech-savvy groups are actually in the resource sector, out of necessity, are realizing that, you know, you look at what they're doing to modernize and the technology that they've been able to create and bring on, it's been quite something. So, you know, I'm very optimistic that we have a huge opportunity still in front of us. And I'll always be pushing that. Again, yes, we know there's changes though.
Anything else that comes to mind that you would like to talk about, or?
Well, I think we just need to remember when we're making these decisions that it's about the families and it's about our communities.
Yeah.
To me, that's back to what first got me really into politics.
Yeah.
And I still try to remind myself when I look in the mirror every day is we need to remember that if we're going to have a thriving community, a thriving downtown, there has to be opportunity for people. There has to be opportunities for people to make decisions, to choose to grow, to expand in their lives. So they can start with $25.47 and do something with their life if we have those opportunities for them here. And I think we also need to remember through that, though, that not everybody's as blessed. Yeah. And so our job is to also, in our province, to remind ourselves that there's a lot of people, unfortunately, who are dealing with addictions issues, mental health issues. Our health system is cracking right now. Yeah. And we just need to remind us, we get in our little silos sometimes, whether it's with industry or with everything that we're doing. And the big picture is we just need to remember that we got to look out for each other and make good decisions to help everyone.
Yeah, and I fully agree. Be living in the most beautiful place in the world with most of the opportunities where you can still say that if you work hard and you stay the course, you will be successful. At least you don't have to be all entrepreneurs and multimillionaires or whatever they call them. You know that.
But you can live a great life.
Yeah, but at the same time, that the resources in this province belong to you and me and all the other people, and to be fair and let other people share and then bring the indigenous community into the industry. I think it's very important. For the larger investors, sometimes we beat up on them a little bit maybe. That what they will do, as you so already mentioned, is they need to know predictability more than anything. Mm-hmm. And saying, tell them what the rules are. If you don't tell them what the rules are, then they have to say, be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. And on that basis, we cannot invest. No. And so, so I would urge this government, look at some of the things that we are doing. If we made errors and mistakes, let's correct them and then move forward and go from there.
Yeah, and my job in the short term as the new critic on this is to really get that information so I can make sure I come back to my team as we get ready for whenever the next provincial election will be, to make sure that we have some good policy ideas that we can show to people that say, if we're fortunate enough to get reelected and back into government, that we see what we can do to help people, help industry. And I know Kevin Falcon, our leader of our party, has been very adamant with myself that we're only going to make promises that we can deliver on. We don't want to be, we've learned, we don't want to be out there just promising the world and then having to apologize that we can't deliver. No. There's a huge opportunity and we can get it right. But we need to be talking to the people who are in the know, working with our First Nations partners, working with our community leaders and with industry. I think everybody at the table, we can conquer this.
Yeah. Mike.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.
Thank you.